Okay, so this is the 10-minute presentation. And so let me just go ahead and get this puppy ready.
Next one.
So 3 of you have been called back by the company that you gave your full presentation to for a second visit. So that means both of us have heard your message yesterday, but we called you back to ask you to speak only about the ethical aspects of the problem, and then to explain why your solution successfully handles those ethical issues. You have a maximum of 10 minutes. There will be no Q&A. You may not use slides or videos. You probably don't want to have more than 3 members of your team present. So unless someone's crouched down hiding behind that, we're good. So let me know when you're ready to go, and I will start the clock, and we will take notes and listen and have fun.
Ready whenever you are.
Okay, go for it.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us back to discuss the ethical implications that your company is currently facing. We're the Red Fox Consulting Group, and we hope to provide some solutions to the ethical problem that you're facing. Starting off with introductions, I'm Andrea Bonan.
I'm Sarah Brzozowski.
And I am Maeve Hanlon.
Just to give a brief overview of the issue at hand, your former CEO, Trevor Milton, used a variety of media platforms to provide gross misrepresentations of your company's products and operations. Specifically, he advertised that your company was manufacturing fully electric pickup trucks and 18-wheelers, and these vehicles were fully operational, in addition to that your company was producing hydrogen at a reduced cost. Unfortunately, all of these claims were untrue and had no grounding in actual fact or reality, and as a result, your investors sustained massive losses. The main stakeholders affected were the investors in your company, General Motors, Hindenburg Research, and your company's employees. Within the investor category, the main categories impacted were equity investors, angel investors, and venture capitalists. Common stockholders were also affected, but not to the same degree as the other 3 groups. Additionally, General Motors sustained massive losses considering they owned 11% share in your company at the time that all of these fraudulent claims had come to light. And Hindenburg Research was the group of short sellers who benefited from these claims coming to light.
Your company's current mission statement is pioneering solutions for a zero emissions world. They also believe that they are made by and made for those who lead, placing an emphasis on leadership and innovation. Trevor Milton founded your company in 2014, and he did hold the role of CEO and chair of the board until the 2020 ethical crisis came to light. This indicated that there was duality between the C-suite and the board of directors, granting him an excess amount of power since there were no checks and balances to keep that power in place. Currently, your new CEO, Stephen Gursky, has done a great job stepping into his role and making sure that there are checks and balances in place, as he does not hold a board position. He does hold 30 years of executive leadership in various aspects of business. So we do believe that this is a great step in the right direction, but there are other solutions that we hope to provide for your company so that they can further build back their reputation. The first suggestion we have is to do a public apology. This would be in the form of a video posted on your website, in addition to a newsletter sent to your current former investors, current employees, and former employees. Also, we recommend a 5-year payback plan outlining how you plan to recover financially, in addition to paying back investors. We do recognize that you paid back investors through an SEC settlement, but that was not all of the money that investors made. So we hope to more formally repair these relationships to build back your reputation.
Moving off of Andrea, another recommendation that we recommend you implement into your company is creating an ethical committee. This would be a new position you would add, which would be the Vice President of Ethical Affairs. This role would report directly to the CEO, as well as consult with the chairman of the board. This VP of Ethical Affairs would also oversee and provide insight to 3 internal members as well as 3 external members, providing an inside as well as an outside perspective on your company. In addition, we recommend you add an anonymous hotline within your organization. This would be used for your employees to voice any ethical concerns that they might have. To that new position, we recommend you add, which is the Vice President of Ethical Affairs. In addition, we would recommend you create an ethical contract of rights. This would be a set of guidelines for your company as well as your employees to abide by. Just a little key highlights to review. We would recommend you point out the guidelines for social media posting, risk management, and employee code of conduct. We strongly recommend you post a guidelines for strict social media postings, as you have had problems in the past with that, promoting products before they are fully functioning vehicles. In addition, before implementing this into the company, we would recommend you have a sit down with your employees to ask them for their feedback on how they would feel this would be implemented into your company. After this, we would recommend, when your ethical contract of rights is in place, to post it on your website for everyone to see, so your investors and consumers know you are upholding your employees to a high standard. In addition, we would recommend creating a board member, which would be the Vice President of Marketing. They would specialize in rebranding and social media marketing. And once they seek out this role, we would recommend this VP look for an external focus group to run their promotional idea and campaign strategies to make sure we are promoting Nicole in a positive light to the public.
And we also recommend that you host a press conference per se, in which your current CEO and new leadership would be able to invite back former investors, lay out their public apology, and explain more in detail the ethical contract of rights, in addition to all the new positions that we are adding to the executive suite. This would be an additional chance to issue a public apology on a more wider base, on a more personal base as well, of directly inviting former investors back. Additionally, it would also be an opportunity, like I said, for your company to repair its investor relations, and move your company forward from this situation. This would also be a chance for your company to gain feedback from investors, and ask them to see what they would like to see from your company and leadership as a whole moving forward. Additionally, through this ethical dilemma, your investors lost a total of $660 million. Like we mentioned, you did settle with the SEC, and that only covered $125 million, which leaves a $535 million difference that we believe your company owes back to its investors. Once your company has reached a more financially feasible position, we do recommend that you include a new dividend payment to kind of bridge this gap and repay the difference back to investors. We do understand that this is a very big undertaking for your company, but we recommend this keeping in mind that, and with the intention of repaying back your investors and attracting ethically minded and socially minded investors who will appreciate the effort that you are taking into repaying investors, owning up to your past mistakes, and moving the company forward. Additionally, although your current financials do not provide the most positive outlook for your company, we do believe this is something that you can move past and that you can grow from. We do forecast that your company will reach its break-even profit within the next 5 to 10 years, largely due to increasing consumer and legislative sentiment, promoting electric vehicles and sustainability as a whole, given various legislations in different states that are promoting increased electric vehicles and a decrease in carbon emissions across the consumer, industrial, and transportation sectors. We believe that this creates a gap in the market where your company can continue to invest in its research and development and be the ethical hero that the electric vehicle industry needs.
Thank you.
So each time, Ruth and I will give up to 5 minutes of feedback. So I suppose technically the remaining 3 teams might benefit from that feedback, but it's okay because the Marist team is so giving and loving. So Ruth, do you want to start or?
Yeah, having not seen this before, what's so interesting is I think you created what you perceive as an ethics crisis. The question is a bit more of a PR crisis than an ethics crisis. And I found, it's so interesting because the quote unquote victims, putting aside, generally a lack of trust in corporate executives, a lot of them are venture capitalists and investors in a startup. And I don't typically have great sympathy for venture capitalists, especially I'm actually representing a group of them now. And they let their CEO get away with murder. And now they're all up in arms, but they didn't stop it while it was happening. So I'm trying to think, what is the ethics crisis here? Is it this man's behavior that he misrepresents? Is there an ethical breach of leadership in the board? So when you skirted on the issue of creating separate board positions and board accountability, that to me was the most relevant part as to the ethics, as opposed to the branding. In terms of paying an SEC settlement, and now do we owe more? Do we owe more to our past investors, or do we owe a commitment to the public, to the future investors, to the future of the EV industry? So those were the dichotomies, and you were getting there. And that's why the 10 minutes is so tough, right? Because it feels like a long time when you're up there. Believe me, I know that. But it's not enough time to really go into the depth. I wish I had seen you yesterday when you had, 40 minutes to basically do the same thing. But very poised, all three of you. Excellent public speaking skills. Very different personalities too, which is kind of an interesting, combination.
Good. Let's see. So you were 8 minutes, which is so you definitely never want to go over 10. So that's fantastic. Really liked you kept the intros very quick because we already knew who you were, so it was the right thing to do, but you did it quick. You did a brief summary of what the issue was with the CEO misconduct, which you finished within the first minute. So good that it was very quick. We need to be reminded we're busy, important people, but you obviously because I did benefit from hearing them yesterday, and I said you did a good job by specifically listing your stakeholders. So that was a very good thing. And you didn't just do it superficially, but the specificity of the stakeholders was great. I'm a huge fan of the way you noted the mission statement at the beginning, and you talked about how we already have begun to fix the problem by making sure there were checks and balances with the new CEO that were not with the last one. So you are making us feel good, like we're good board members before you go in with that was a great start, but we have more to suggest. It's an excellent approach, because at the beginning, we're defensive that you're walking in here and you're accusing us of being bad board members. So you quickly said something positive about us before you focused on the fact that there was more to go, but we were now receptive to hear you because you stroked how good we are. Eye contact was very good. The number of items, I wrote down that you gave 7 specific things in your solution. So that's great. It shows a lot of thought. You were able to get them all in within 10 minutes. And it shows the fact that it's a big task and you can't just solve it with 1 or 2 cute ideas. 7 different ways to approach it. The fact that the ethical contract of rights is published on the website means that the entire world will hold you accountable. So it's a big difference between coming up with the ethical contract of rights, but not making it public, so that you technically have the power to ignore it if it becomes inconvenient in the future. The way you not only created the ethical committee and the VP of ethical affairs, you got to the level of specificity of who the person reports to. You went out of your way to also bring in the VP of marketing. So this level of depth is very good. It means that your solution is not just superficial. We should all wake up one day and be better people. Bye. And so I wish I was more confident in knowing that when you say 5 to 10 years break even, does that include the 600 Is it 625 or 650?
660.
660? Is that before the 660 or after?
That's after, or
Okay.
before we like make the payment back to
That's
investors.
just.
Before.
That's a startup.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a startup.
So, yeah, it would have been awesome if it was crystal clear to me. To the extent that your name,
Sarah.
Sarah. So to the extent that there was a moment when you weren't sure what to say next or whatever, that's totally okay. You handled it perfectly. Don't say sorry. Don't say, oh, I'm an idiot. Oh, give me a second. You just pause, recollect yourself. You only did it for a second and a half and move forward. Perfect. Don't call attention to yourself. Liked the balance among the three people. So it sucks if you have three people and one almost never speaks. I'm interested in kind of what Ruth brought up, which is there's a possibility that your investors may have gotten some sort of insurance payout or something associated with the loss. So if you then voluntarily agree to pay them the 660, there's going to be some legal and financial effect to that, because like the insurance companies that paid them will then expect to be paid back and things like that. So it's a little more complicated, but it's okay. You didn't have to get into that level of specifics of tax law, but maybe next year. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you now can breathe and
Until the afternoon.
yeah, until the 92nd. Cool. Okay.
Up to Minnesota, Marist.
Minnesota. So we're going alphabetically. Okay.
What's on the list? Dr. Cunningham?
So out of fairness, you didn't listen to any of that feedback, right?
No, of course not.
Awesome.
You're
You're singing in your head. Okay. So I'm going to read the exact same paragraph, speaking of fairness, and then I'm going to press the button and you have up to 10 minutes.
How do you need to read it again? Did you hear the instructions or do you need them read again?
I think would be good. I mean, that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Go.
Thank you, Keeper's Board of Directors, for meeting with us again today to discuss your decision to scale up your AI matchmaking service for a diverse and lonely world. I know you want mostly ethics in this talk, but we're going to quickly go over some finances and law and then dive deep into the ethics. So from a financials perspective, Keeper needs to scale immediately to hit a mass market to attain economies of scale in order to stay competitive with industry giants such as Match Group, who are going to be quickly utilizing breakthroughs in AI technology to develop superior algorithms. Next, from a legal perspective, Keeper's current pricing model is the marriage bounty, which, as you know, requires users to volunteer the information that they've been married in order for Keeper to then collect the marriage bounty price. This is not scalable on a mass market level because there will be people who will not volunteer this information, at which point Keeper's only option is to track them down, monitor them, and expose themselves to the risk of privacy violations that could result in lawsuits. So we're done with that section. I'm going to hand it off to Roy, who will begin our ethical analysis.
Thank you, Will. So our first ethical dimension has to do with your matching algorithm. Right now, you use two methods for matching clients. You use the trait method, in which a user inputs personal information about themselves, and the algorithm assigns a match based on compatibility. The other option is the preference trait matching method, in which a user inputs preferences and the algorithm assigns a match based on those. Right now, you emphasize preference trait matching. However, we fear that in a mass market setting, preference trait matching is not going to precisely serve every demographic. Demographics like older people, people higher in openness, and females tend to have more accurate preferences. That is to say, they usually know what they want in a long-term partnership. So the preference trait algorithm works for them. However, demographics like people low in openness, people that are younger and males tend to make dating decisions based on more superficial preferences. And so an algorithm that assigns matches based on preferences is not going to serve them as well. It's going to assign a lot of low resolution matches. We see this disparity in amount of quality matches as an ethical concern because as a general principle, every user, regardless of demographic information, deserves the same quality of product. In order to remedy this, we recommend emphasizing trait matching in order to precisely match every demographic. I'll hand it back to Will.
Our next dimension of ethical analysis is a lack of inclusivity currently in Keeper's product. This is going to be in two parts. First is your website usability, and second is the bias present in your AI. So on website usability, when users first want to sign up for your product, they're given two options. Women start here, men start here. This does not respect the identities of non-binary people or anyone who does not fit into men and women categories. Then after clicking one of these buttons, they enter a get to know you form. And in this get to know you form, there is no other questions about gender identity or sexuality. And there's also an interesting difference between the men's and women's forms. And that is that the men's asks about career and financial stability, the women's does not. Now, we talked with your CEO, Jake, about this, and he said that this decision was based on evolutionary psychology research, which suggests that women care more about men's careers than they care about their own. I'll leave it to the accomplished board of, the accomplished woman on the board of Keeper to see the irony in that statement. So next, we'll move on to bias in the AI. So the parameters which are currently used to determine a good match in Keeper's AI are very heteronormative. Furthermore, these parameters have been trained on hetero couples, thus exacerbating the bias already suggested with those heteronormative parameters. So when an LGBT plus person tries to get a match on Keeper, it treats them much in the same way as it would treat a hetero person, which is obviously ridiculous. This needs to be changed. I'd like to briefly remind you of your mission statement at Keeper, which is to end human loneliness by giving everyone the opportunity to start a happy, healthy family. Now, who exactly does everyone include? Clearly, at this point, it doesn't include LGBT plus people. We have some suggestions to fix this, though. First, one ungendered sign-up button. Second, once users click that button, they're asked questions in the get to know you form about gender identity and sexual orientation. Also, career and financial stability for all users should be asked about on that form. And next, this leads into our second suggestion to mitigate AI bias. You should train a new model with new parameters, which take data from this new form, which gathers information like gender identity and sexual orientation, and then train this new model on LGBT plus couples so that you can serve all demographics equally. I'm going to hand it off to Jason now to hit our last ethical dimension.
Thanks, Will. So our last ethical dimension revolves around your self-improvement strategy for clients. Your goal was to create a self-improvement strategy that not only encourages clients to undertake self-improvement measures, but as well as communicate what characteristics and habits about them needed to be changed in order to succeed through your service, Keeper. The self-improvement strategy is currently has two different methods of garnering self-improvement suggestions. One is an AI dating coach, which has been trained to give responses that ultimately culminate in flowery language that does not help your clients orient themselves on any path to self-improvement. Our firm believes that this is unethical because it not only conflicts with your internal values, value 4 being honesty is best, and value 7, the individual matters, but also general ethical principles such as honesty, respect, and integrity. Moving on, the second aspect is you have multiple blog posts on your website, such as how to be lonely, ugly, and eventually divorced. Not only does this conflict with those internal values 4 and 7, but it also conflicts with general ethical principles. Your AI dating coach is just too gentle in delivering hard truths, which you believe clients may need to hear in order to improve themselves and be successful, while the blog posts are too harsh in that same messaging of hard truths. Our firm suggests that you not only make the blog posts and the AI dating coach consistent with the messaging that they give in their respectively, but also to gather testimonials from clients who followed the self-improvement strategy and found success, and then start a long-form media PR campaign to communicate that at Keeper, the individual does matter and that we will have to tell you hard truths, but ultimately, we want you to have a successful match. Thank you, Board of Director of Keeper, for bringing us back in to give an ethical consultation.
Right. Uh, 9 minutes and 28 seconds, so you're perfect.
Will.
Always say. Do you want to jump in or?
Sure. So I listened to them yesterday. For all the single people in the room, were you paying attention? All the tips on dating and on unconscious bias, right? So, I mean, this is such a great subject. And I say that having watched the Jewish matchmaker and the Indian matchmaker, you know, with whatever algorithms they have, and never mind the what's he called, the mature bachelor, who just got a divorce after 3 months.
Golden.
Oh, the golden.
The golden bachelor. Okay, I don't watch TV enough. I'm too busy studying. Anyways, this was very interesting. So I have to say that personally, I don't know that I would spend very much time on law and finance at the beginning of this thing, because I wanted to hear ethics, right? We're calling you back. So we've already heard your legal and financial dimensions yesterday. So I wanted you to get into the meat of gender inequality. What is the unethical situation? Why is it unethical to have the different questionnaires be different for men than for women, and never mind by non-binary folks? And I was fascinated by the AI bias. All I could think is, why do you think gay couples have different desires and needs in life than heterosexual couples? Is that a bias, by the way, in and of itself? But it's really fascinating to see emotion, right, in dating and falling in love, meet AI. That is just such a almost incongruous kind of thing. I think the self-improvement strategy part of it is a little more difficult to express in a few moments, as opposed to when you had the longer presentation yesterday. The bias stuff was excellent, as far as I'm concerned. The notion that that your existing platform isn't scalable. I wish it would spend a little more time on privacy issues, because I think that's clearly an ethical thing. At the end, when you did talk about the blog posts and something, one is too harsh, one is too mild, but there was an ethical element in that, and that's discerning truth. What is truth? Okay, so my name is Ruth, so they always say you can't spell, truth without Ruth. And that was Justice Ginsburg's, line, not mine. Wasn't sure how PR really factors into this. but our algorithms can algorithms meet human life, right? Are they from another planet? So I thought it was fascinating. I would love to see, and I know you guys actually met the owner of Keeper, right? You met the CEO, which is going above and beyond. I would, I would love to see sociological studies 5-10 years down the road to see whether men and women really do have different needs or express themselves in the questionnaires differently. Or is that something more of my generation that's, dissipating? I mean, it would be the psychology is fascinating here, but you're very poised. You worked hard on this and you took what could be hours of discussion and reduced it to 10 minutes, which is, very commendable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I agree with a lot of what Ruth said. So again, awesome for time, keeping within time. It just has to be said. Eye contact, very good. I like Ruth. I was anxious when you were going to go down financial and legal, but I realized you finished it within 90 seconds and you kind of needed to say that to tee up what the ethical issues were. So I respect why you did what you did. I wanted to hate you, but in the end I didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
The tracking and the monitoring. So yeah, that as Ruth said, obviously the key here is the ethics. And going back to the first team, Marist, it all is that most important thing, which is why is this issue an ethics issue? And so the answer might be the allocation of benefits and harms. The answer might be an issue of fairness or justice. Your first issue was an issue of fairness because the inconsistency, it's a version of it's not fair, it's not right, it shows discrimination, right? So later on, Jason, you very specifically saying it violates our values and then the general ethical principles of honesty, respect, and integrity and everything. And I almost feel like you harped on at the end because yesterday we told you to harp on it.
Yeah.
And you did what we were told. So this is good. But again, we board members are busy business people. We're on the board because we are financially successful, not because we care about ethics or knowledgeable about ethics. So you guys coming in with this expertise in ethics is immensely important, and it's important for everybody to treat us like the kindergartners we are. And you have to say, this is unethical because it harms people who who shouldn't be harmed, when it's not necessary, So
And to pick up on what Tim just said, that statement about the honesty and integrity came pretty late in the presentation. I think you should have led with it because you would have grabbed us at that point. Okay, we got to give you a background, but here's why. Because repetition, even though it feels like 10 minutes is such a short time, repetition can be important because you want to bury the thought about honesty and integrity in my head. And remember, as Tim said, we're busy people. We're busy doing other things while we're sort of listening to you. A little repetition of that could have been incredibly beneficial. You did repeat the bias, right? That came across repeatedly, the bias and the unfairness. But now you're going to talk about implementing an ethical program. So it's important to hit on the positive version, the yin to the yang, right?
Yeah.
So made the point. Number one, inconsistency equals unfairness. Number two, bias is unnecessary discrimination. Interesting that you brought up the mission statement in the middle. So I thought Marist was awesome because they brought it up at the beginning. But I love the beginning. The middle sort of worked because you used it as a lead into your solutions to the issues. So again, wanted to think of it as a negative, but it ended up not being a negative. And then third, the self-improvement strategy. Obviously, I know the three of you are so smart to realize that when you tell us about that article about lonely and divorced, it slaps us in the face the way it should, and it works. So it's unbelievable that they still have that up on their website. And so it's good that you brought it in. And then obviously very specific on the solutions, you know, the testimonials, the long form campaign, just like you heard me say to Marist, it's excellent that you had specific solutions instead of just a general thing. And I guess my last statement is the board has expressed an interest in expanding the customer base, which you guys know better than everybody. Your attitude in your recommendations were this company and its board and its leadership, you know, want to be the most ethical that they should be, which is great. What I'm wondering is, in real life, is it the case that the board members were chosen because they're socially conservative? They're not huge fans of non-binary persons. The executive management's going in that direction because it's the right thing to do financially and for the long-term financial success of the business. But what do you do if you're telling it to people who purposely created a company to exclude them? And maybe they don't want to cater that to community because they find them to be unethical people or something. So anyway, that's a level of detail that's not fair to ask of you, but it's a wacky situation to just assume that we want to be ethical. And what a weird thing for you to do a good job speaking to an audience that maybe you already know don't necessarily. Ethics is possibly not the most important thing to them.
Well, Christian ethics, maybe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We talked about this after the presentation yesterday because someone else, one of the judges wondered about that. And you said that having spoken with the CEO, that was in fact not the case. He was not pursuing a Judeo-Christian religious imperative here at all.
Definitely traditional conservative.
That traditional conservative, but not right.
Because it's funny because obviously you are Mr. Integrity, but it's the least integrity thing. Actually, I had lunch with them and a little bit, but it's the least integrity thing for the board to agree with your excellent recommendations and for us to implement them. But we don't actually believe it in our hearts. And that's the opposite of integrity because we're portraying a picture that we're an ethical, non-biased, non-discriminatory organization, but in secret, we really are. But obviously you can't get into that.
Plus, they're stuck with Title VII, right? The civil rights law.
Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. We're up to the Pennsylvania State University.
You just want it there. Oh,
Okay, there's two of you?
Yes, just two of us, thank you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I can do so I can put this so we can both see it.
Oh, that's okay. All right, you get to turn it on because I am the tech.
So do you want me to read the puppy or are you good?
I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Okay.
right, so I'm gonna press the button and we'll go.
Hello, and thank you for inviting us back to TikTok's US Senior Leadership Meeting to talk about the ethical matters behind TikTok's role in creating a generation of Sephora kids. My name is Grace Hubbard, and I'm here with my colleague,
Angela Lamley.
And as a part of GAL Advisory, we are here to talk about why this is not just a financial and legal issue, but one of ethical matters. So in our modern society, we are seeing this digital third space being created by social media companies in which users are absorbing content. This is primarily populated by young users, and their guardians are not always aware of the content that young users are consuming. As our online and offline interactions are becoming increasingly intertwined, we're seeing that social media companies such as yourselves are really having this power and influence over the development of moral reasoning and social interactions in young users. One case where this comes to fruition is the Sephora Kids example, in which this is an effect of the content that young users are consuming on social media platforms such as your own. These Sephora Kids are children which are seen ransacking stores, they're seen being disrespectful, harassing employees, and also consuming products that are potentially harmful to themselves. In this case, we are seeing that these Sephora Kids are, in this case, we are seeing that this is more than just children being rude, more than bad parenting, or more than just mischief, but instead a bigger issue of business ethics and social responsibility. Now, we recognize that there are a multitude of generations that exist on your app, but our young users are really the most vulnerable. Even this morning, there was a New York Times article that talked about the expansion of TikTok and how it has changed America, and whether it is financially, whether it's the legislation that is trying to catch up. But the one thing that is really hard to measure and pinpoint is the ability for our young users to flourish in society as they grow older and do step out into society and offline. So it is really imperative that we have a trust built between three key stakeholders of TikTok, of our young users aged 13 to 17, and of their guardians. If we have this trust, we can then form a partnership and responsibility in which we recognize that TikTok has this enormous influence over the development of their decision-making skills, what they find to be morally acceptable, and what they do once they step off of that online platform and digital third space and into the offline of real society as they can interact with other members of society. Right now, we've seen that this trust has been severed between your three key stakeholders, and that's where we're really seeing this issue. So we need to rebuild this trust and step away from just mere bare minimum guidelines of cyber safety, and actually look at what well-being means when we're looking at this ever-growing digital space and TikTok. So I'll pass it on to Grace to talk about credibility and our trust equation. Yes, so how do we rebuild trust? The rest of our analysis and recommendations are built off of the trust equation. The trust equation is a framework that is widely used by businesses to analyze trust amongst stakeholders. This trust equation states that trust is the sum of credibility, reliability, and intimacy, all divided by self-interest. So we'll dive into each of these factors and how it relates back to our situation. So first, looking at credibility, you're asked two key questions here. Do you as a company know what you are talking about when it comes to responsibility? And second, does the public believe you? So in this case, our proposed solution to increase credibility is to really rewrite your community guidelines to be more firm and definitive. This is moving away from suggestive language such as guidelines to a more firm code of conduct. In this way, we are seeing that credibility is being increased. So I'll pass it off to Angela to talk about reliability. Once we have established that first part of the equation of credibility, reliability looks at action-oriented proof. So we need to prove that we are not only incentivized by financials, but we actually do want to act on these things that may violate our code of conduct. We have proposed a system in which we look at content that could be violative of these code of conducts before and after upload. So before the upload of this specific post that may or may not be breaking our rules and regulations, we will issue a warning notification to tell the user that we are trying to look out for them and that we respect them as a flourishing human outside of just metrics and usernames. If they do continue to post and violate this code of conduct, we do have to make sure that not only are we educating them on why it's important to follow our rules and regulations, but there is that sense of accountability and enforceability. If they continue to violate the code of conduct, they will be issued strikes and mandated to take an informative knowledge quiz so that they understand what is in the code of conduct and how they have violated that.
Once they accumulate 3 strikes for violations, they will move on to a permanent account ban until the age of 18. And this is really important to hammer home the fact that TikTok cares about its users when we're looking at that second part of reliability. Now that we've established credibility in the language that we're using and reliability in how we're going to see that happen in action-oriented proofs, we're going to move towards intimacy. Now, what does this mean in this context? We're looking at all stakeholders, and that means we can't neglect the parents and guardians of our young users. We need to build a relationship with them and bridge that gap of knowledge that currently exists. And as we mentioned earlier, this is really what is creating that lack of trust, is that parents don't know what their children are interacting with on this digital space. And so we recommended a weekly Guardian report, which would show the hashtags they're interacting with, how much time they've spent on TikTok. And we want to really bring forward some great initiatives that you already have in place. This includes parental controls that you have established, but parents are unaware of. And so we want to empower them with that knowledge. So to recap, we've touched on intimacy and building relationships. We've touched on credibility and establishing a code of conduct, and reliability and how we're going to see that happen in action.
Yeah, so now that we've talked on that, we cannot forget the self-interest part of this equation. So self-interest is essential to TikTok's operations as a business, but we're seeing this primarily now with financial incentives, and we cannot overshadow the responsibility that TikTok also has to its stakeholders, those young users and their guardians. So we're urging TikTok to redefine self-interest from one that is solely based on immediate financial gains to one that is really focused on the flourishing of young users and the rest of the stakeholders in this situation.
Success should not only be financial metrics, but it really should be that holistic view of maximizing stakeholder value, and that includes well-being. So we really want TikTok to be an industry leader, not only in the tech and social media sphere, but also when it comes to caring for their young users, for your young users. And to do this, we really need to reestablish that trust, build that relationship with parents so that we can take that responsibility with our broad sphere of influence and move beyond mere bare minimum safety measures to well-being. Thank you for having us back today to talk about the ethical scenario to do with this case, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Here you go.
Okay. Cool. You first or me first?
You first, that's fine.
Okay. Nice job. Nice job. So let's see. The way Ruth made the point after the last one about, hey, this is the 10-minute, it's about ethics. We heard more reference to ethics from you than anyone else so far. And you didn't do it sloppily. And as you know, you're not supposed to say Aristotle, and you obviously didn't. But you know, you're the first group that said the word harm, and you didn't do it because I told you to do it 20 minutes ago. It was a natural part of your message. You used the word responsibility. You used the word accountability. You used the word credibility, reliability, intimacy. You used the phrase self-interest. And so you even used maximize stakeholder value, which is an interesting twist on the concept that a lot of these awful, selfish, rich board members are consumed with maximizing shareholder value. And so it's a fun part that you did the twist on that. You guys used the word integrity. So you delivered what we asked for, which is always a good thing. Love the strength of your voices, love the eye contact. I felt it felt rushed, felt like you were talking too fast. So, you know, next time have a beer before you do it. And that calms me down. I do it like 3 times a day.
At 9 in the morning.
So yeah, you went out of your way to remind us of who you were and what the subject is as quickly as you could. You only spent 25 seconds on that before you started into what was happening. You used moral reasoning, which is amazing to find a way to use that in an important business conversation, and you did it. It wasn't fake or false, which would have sucked. It was legit. Literally, the topic you were talking about talks about the reality that 13 to 17-year-olds do not have the moral reasoning skills of people who are over 18. So that's incredible. So anyway, obviously, that I'm mostly happy. The way you integrated the article of the New York Times this morning, the audience members love when you are on top of current things and love it when you say things that they don't even know yet. It makes you look even smarter than you really are.
Well, we don't want to say that you aren't really smart. Even smarter.
Even smarter.
Even smarter.
The trust equation, the fact that you didn't just make it up, that this is an existing thing is awesome, because we're sitting there saying, okay, you guys came up with a cute idea, but how do we know it's going to work? The concept that you're recommending something that has a history and we can check its past to see if it worked is kind of brilliant. Rewriting the guidelines to a code of conduct, because a code of conduct is the next level of seriousness. Awesome. It's so good that you're challenging the board to go beyond just the superficial of the guidelines and start to get in it for real. So I should shut up. Anyway, good job.
Okay, yeah. So what I found so interesting here is, I'm a lawyer, so people don't think of law and math matching, but they do. Because when you look at something critically and analytically, inevitably, you are putting an equation in your head. And that could be about substantive due process as much as it is about calculating taxes or something. And when you set up the trust equation, which is of course a known quantity, you defined, it was almost like you were working from the top of the equation. What are the components of the equation? Reliability, credibility, intimacy, divided by self-interest. I wrote it out as an equation, scribbled it out as an equation. So I found that to be absolutely fascinating, that you set up a rubric that whether I buy into this or not, I now know my equation. Now, how are you going to put the elements in to that equation? And immediately you talked about the code of conduct, right? As opposed to guidelines. As to credibility, you went down to reliability and you postulated something specific. You went into the warning levels. You had a system in place. So it wasn't just a blanket statement of an equation. It was, here's implementation in each separate silo. And then you ultimately tie it all back together in terms of where is self-interest. Okay, so now we're at the final stage, and I was wondering, how are you going to do self-interest here? And you say, well, it's not just about money, it's about flourishing and building trust. And I just thought that was so incredibly powerful. It helped you in terms of structuring the 10 minutes, right? You had a structure that you were fitting into. It wasn't just, let me talk about all these different things and how relevant they are. It was so structurally sound as a presentation. We could put this up on the board as a formula. And I think for board members here, busy board members, that gave me a contextualization that was very powerful. I agree with Tim about the New York Times. I read it this morning. And I thought it was important that you defined at the very beginning the digital third space for content. That was very helpful. You defined the initial constituency, the user, and then the guardian. You didn't downplay the autonomy of, you didn't take the autonomy of the user and then disregard the interests of the guardian. I really enjoyed this one, and I thought your presentations both were lovely.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So everyone here, please don't think that we know yet who's
We
first or
don't.
second or third. Just because we're nice to people doesn't mean that we care about them.
It's all-
So we're definitely gonna, but we're being supportive and
We are very open-minded.
yes,
We're very open-minded, and it's so interesting afterwards when you guys leave, when we start debating, you know, 'cause
Yeah.
we really do. We've been at this a lot of years, the two of us.
yes, and we care deeply about the fact that, you know, the team that went first was fantastic, and the team that went second was fantastic, and the third one was too. So, you know, just because we use our time to mostly be positive and constructive doesn't mean that we didn't think wonderful things about the first two teams.
Yeah.
But we do have to sit through a fourth team, so let's do this.
Well.
I'm kidding.
The University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. One of my law school classmates was an alumna.
Gentlemen, do you want me to read the thing, or do you feel good?
I think we're good.
Okay, all right, so yeah, you have up to 10
Okay,
minutes.
you wanna set this
Sure,
going again?
and let's have fun.
Greetings and thank you, Board of the Walt Disney Company, for inviting Lincoln and Company back to consult with you more on the ethical issues. Again, my name is Alex Wong.
My name is Vijay Krishnan.
We'll just get straight into it. So to recap the problem, we're talking about how to ethically balance between the expressive freedoms of artist voices along with the cost effectiveness of AI usage. With this recent rise in artificial intelligence, it's been clear that many industries can improve their efficiencies with artificial intelligence, but there are some industries that just cannot thrive on it alone. Your industry of entertainment is one of those industries, and therefore your company cannot thrive on artificial intelligence alone. This problem mainly stemmed from events that happened last year. One, a statement made by your CEO, Bob Iger, in which he said, with the rise of AI, it can improve efficiencies, but it might prove difficult to manage in the coming years and so forth, as well as with the huge strikes made by the Screenwriters Guild of America, the WGA, all throughout last summer. When they were arguing on behalf of better wages for screenwriters, as well as job security in the face of AI. Obviously from this, we get the key stakeholder of screenwriters, since they are the ones affected by the issue, and the ethical dilemma posed by here is that it would bring harm to the fact that the physical element that they bring to the screenwriting process, to the creation of the Disney magic, would be lost in the substitution of AI. Then, of course, there is the key stakeholder of you all, the Walt Disney Company, where the executive decisions that you will make at this point will determine the future, will determine the effects of what will happen in the course of growing AI and growing evolution and technology. And lastly, of course, there is the key stakeholder of the customers, because despite what the screenwriters may write for the company, and despite what Disney may distribute out there, is the customers who are receiving and then responding to said content, and will determine whether for better or for worse, how they will react to this implementation of digesting the problem and responding to both the screenwriters as well as the integration of AI. Going into the ethical issues related to the problem, focusing on the stakeholder of the Walt Disney Company first. If you were to fully integrate an AI, it would directly go against your mission statement, which states you are here to educate, inform, inspire for unparalleled storytelling and integrating new technologies. By removing that humanistic aspect of the screenwriters and full integration of AI, you are deliberately going against your mission statement in trying to make essential movie magic, television magic, whatever that is wowed the general public for more than a century now. If you want to integrate AI fully, you'd still be applying by the mission statement, but you'd also be going against that latter part of integrating new technologies, always being at the forefront of disruption, trying to be adjusted to the times, but still not fall behind compared to other companies within the industry as well. Moving on to the key stakeholder group of screenwriters. Of course, full integration of AI would substitute them completely, replace their jobs with the computing technology. and bring the harm to them in limiting their expressive freedoms, as well as eliminating their fair share of the contract that they are obliged to give on behalf of Disney. However, not integrating AI will still keep their jobs, will still maintain the integrity that is present within the company and the contracts with the screenwriters. However, this might hinder them significantly, though, since in the interest of profit, you might speed them along the screenwriting process to produce even more content on their own dime, thus increasing their stress and decreasing overall quality in the end. And lastly, of course, there are the customers. Full integration of AI would mean more content for them, but it would come at a much lower quality than the Disney company has been known to do, as well as a much less diverse source of content where heavy issues that humans are able to speak to aren't addressed by the artificial intelligence technology itself. And if you wanted to integrate AI within the company, less content would be generated, higher quality content would be generated, but that could still take away from the customer's overall value of what they're contributing back to the company to receive said content in the first place. But how do we solve this all in the end? I turn it over to VJ.
Thank you, Alex. So as we've discussed, it seems that if we go for either a total or no integration of AI policy, we are harming some or all stakeholders in some aspect. So our recommendation is to go with a partial integration of AI through what we call the ACT framework. As we discussed yesterday, the ACT framework has three main components. The first is accept. In the accept phase, we really try to control the narrative around AI and show to all of our stakeholders, from ourselves, our employees, our screenwriters, and our customers, that one, we are going to embrace AI, but two, we're going to do it in a way that matters to all stakeholders. We're going to make sure that we enshrine our own values in those goals to entertain, inform, and inspire our customers while also being at the forefront of technology. But we're also going to integrate other stakeholders' values. We're going to make sure that we make it clear that we care about our screenwriters and their financial and job security, as well as their humanistic element and impact on our own scripts. We're also going to integrate the goals of our customers to make sure that we are clear on creating important and great content for them. This not only holds ourselves accountable, but it also shows by communicating this throughout the company and society that we allow them to keep us accountable in that way. Once we have done this, we would also recommend going in and spreading out around trainings on how to use AI, as well as how to stay compliant with AI. Using AI in an effective way is not always as straightforward as people realize with prompting, but also, more importantly, from our standpoint, is also making sure that screenwriters and others using AI within Disney are not psychologically biased by their use of AI. So they're creating their own frameworks, they're being creative by their own first before they even use AI in the first place. We also want to keep in mind that AI should not be used for the writing or editing directly of any sorts of scripts, as this would be very difficult legally and ethically speaking. This moves us to the second part of the framework, which is the create step. In the create step, we focus on a bottom-up integration of AI into new teams. What this means is that we allow screenwriters and the directors of different films to integrate AI as they see fit within their own areas. There is many issues that come up with this, but in order to mitigate many of these, we recommend a few things. The first is one, making sure that they have gone through proper training, as we mentioned in the accept step. But secondly, also to make sure that they have compliance officers within their own teams. And we recommend these compliance officers to be really accountable primarily to our own compliance departments. The importance of this is frankly because the directors and business executives within Disney may have perverse incentives and may indeed harm some of the things that we'd be going for. Whereas our compliance office is mostly accountable to our accounting firms who are focused mostly on trust and accountability. Once we have integrated this from a bottom-up perspective, we start to analyze how they are integrating it throughout the organization and try and generalize from there, trying to understand which ones have the highest impact with lowest risk with highest impact, and somewhere in the middle to understand which we should integrate with low oversight, high oversight, or frankly not integrate at all. Once we've identified these guidelines, we move on to the transform step, which involves really pushing this out throughout the organization and standardizing how it's pushed, how it works throughout the organization. Once we have transformed our organization, we really focus on making sure that we continue integrating and innovating in ways that are more effective and stay compliant with both current laws as well as our own goals and values. So how does this really affect the stakeholders we talked about before? Let's start with Disney itself. With Disney, we really think there's a few main things. First, it stands up to the mission statement to entertain, inform, and inspire. And in that sense, we're doing this in a better way because AI would allow us to create higher quality and better pictures with a little less time. The other side of it is to make sure that we're staying accountable to our own stakeholders by communicating our own values and telling our stakeholders to keep ourselves accountable, as well as putting in processes to make sure that compliance is ensured throughout the organization. We make sure that we stay accountable to our own mission statement and our own values. Then we come to screenwriters. One of the important things about screenwriters, as well as the strikes that happened last year, is frankly the financial stability of screenwriters. By keeping screenwriters themselves in control of AI, by giving them the training to understand what is or isn't an acceptable use and what is or isn't something that might threaten their own jobs in the future, we make sure that they are able to, instead of being harmed by AI or financially made dependent on it, that they are actually benefited by it and able to find it themselves more productive. With this productivity gain, we also see potential financial benefits if they're able to work on additional things as well, while being less stressed overall. We also maintain their humanistic element, which allows them to essentially, rather than take ideas from AI, still use their own creative perspectives and ideas in ways that are important to them. Finally, we move on to the customers. And from the customer's perspective, we really find that AI integration in this way will only bring benefits. Either they'll have higher quality pictures, they'll have pictures at lower points of time, or they'll have more creative things, or maybe a combination as well. As we can see from all of the perspectives of our stakeholders, we turn from potential harms from either no AI integration or a total AI integration into all potential benefits with partial AI integration using the ACT framework. Thank you, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
All right. Do you want to go first or me go first?
You go first.
Okay. Came in at 10:52, so it did go over the 10 minutes. But again, I know there's a lot there. So that's a negative, but there's so many positives. Even though Ruth and I are really going to make sure that everything is done fairly, it really feels like you were listening to the feedback from the first three teams, how quickly you did the recap so that we could jump right into the ethics. I had the benefit of hearing this yesterday, and this was clearly one of the most well-researched teams.
And you're preaching to the compliance officer. Totally.
Well, and for those in the audience who don't know, my brother is a screenwriter, and he was one of three representatives of the WGA that negotiated the thing. So they didn't know that, but anyway, so I didn't let that influence anything that I had. A lot of insights on this. It's amazing that Alex, you guys finished right at 5 minutes, and so it's like it's a 10-minute presentation, 5. So it worked out really well. Love that you started off with the IBECC statement. You heard me say this to the Marist team. It was your way of saying, you board members are awesome, and we're just here to put a cherry on top of the sort of a thing, because it makes us feel less threatened exactly by you, and we're open to your suggestions. You acknowledge the strike and everything in a way that you really had to make sure that we know you're knowledgeable, just like we congratulated the Penn State people for the New York Times thing. Key stakeholders, obviously, you can't say the word utilitarianism, but by talking about stakeholders, you're saying it exactly the way that business people want to hear it. So that's awesome, because that's what this was about today, was the ethics. And you got right into it with the very specific focus on those three key stakeholders. You, like a couple of other groups, you brought in our mission statement, just like the IBECC statement. You say, you should follow our recommendation if you don't want to violate the terms of your mission statement. So if you want to have integrity, then this is what you need to do. It's fantastic because we hate people suggesting that we lack integrity. Integrity technically is like the easiest way to be ethical. You simply have to live your existing values. And so it's awesome that you took advantage of that. You brought up harm, again, utilitarianism without saying the word. You brought up integrity, which is Aristotle virtue ethics without mentioning Aristotle and the word virtue. You brought in diversity, which is great. You've talked about harm again, stakeholder interests. The ACT framework is wonderful because ethics is complex. So saying here are the 3 stakeholders, here's the ACT, you've given us a structure so that simple-minded rich people can follow your point. She's right that I love that you include the compliance officers because it's one thing to blah, 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 talk about this, but you actually are challenging us that we are going to enforce the standards that you're talking about instead of this just being pure BS PR. You brought up the perverse incentives, perfectly appropriate in this case. So it was excellent that you did that. And bringing up accountability. So again, like you've heard us say to some of the other teams, so pleased that you found a natural way to speak in business terms about business ethics. So good job.
Yeah, and we said most of what I want to say. I thought when you said the mission statement at the beginning, to educate, to inform, to inspire, and then you added a bit about technology, then you said movie magic. Okay, and that really struck a chord because what makes Disney different than a company that sells widgets, you know, or any other product? Disney lives in the universe of magic. And my son, by the way, is a conceptual artist, so he doesn't work for Disney. He's worked on Star Wars and some of the other things. But the notion of the magic, even though you only said the word once, then when you started talking about the creatives and about the humanistic elements in just the originality, the creative process, as opposed to just letting a computer design a film or design the characters, that really resonated with what we are as a board, right? And what Walt Disney perceived all those years ago. And I still remember when Disney World opened, you know, and I remember going to Disneyland in the 1950s, and it was truly a magical place. So how do you keep the magic going in the 21st century? And I thought, again, because you had that ACT rubric, everything kind of, ironically, you know, it was like plug and play. You were able to plug into those things, but you never lost the magic there. When you went back at the end to, okay, now we're going to, you went back up to your beginning. You started about stakeholders, you ended with the stakeholders, okay? And I thought that was a very important reinforcing technique. It was like
what you said before about repeat.
Exactly, the repeat. Because here you're telling us who are the important players here. And you've defined the players, right? And here's the mission, here's the structure. And then you revert to here's how all the stakeholders not only have an interest, it was the beginning, but how their interests can be fulfilled, okay? And balancing them, and I thought that was very powerful. Congratulations. Congratulations to all of you and to your advisors. I know how hard your advisors work on this.
Anything to add? You're good?
You're good?
Okay, all right. So
without whom we can't do any of it.
So again, I think you all know, you know, the IBECC chooses us as judges because we live this reality. So I've been in business ethics for 36 years, and the first 14 years, I did what you've done here. You know, I would get maybe 3 to 4 chances per year, maybe a $1.2, $1.8 million engagement. Deliver this to the board of directors to persuade them to say, yes, we will choose you instead of the other teams out there, just like you guys are competing. And if I didn't get one of these contracts per year, I would get laid off. But if I got the contract, then I had enough work to pay my salary for the next 3 or 4 years. I was happy. And I was making the world a better place by making some Fortune 500 company more ethical. So the good news is, even though all of us judges are different, the great news is you didn't waste your time because Tom brought together people who have actually done this for a living. So any questions or reactions, or do you want to throw something at one of us? No.
I'd love to grab that beer with you sometime.
9 AM beer.
Sure. Well, thank you all. Yes.
So ahead of the 90-minute or 90-second.
90 seconds.
Oh, boy. Presentation session. What would you recommend for us? And like, what tips would you give?
Yeah, you can probably sense that we are challenged to really pay attention to it. So just absolutely do your best to do it within 90 seconds.